Today we're in the village of Lamberhurst, just on the Kent side of the border with Sussex. The village of Lamberhurst was partly in Sussex until just over a century ago, when local people decided they'd all rather be in Kent. The settlement itself dates back a lot further than that.
It takes its name, Lamberhurst, from the church site, which is a wooded hill for lambs or lambing near a stream. And that's where the church was built in 996. The village itself grew up by the best crossing of the river that there is in the area. It started off as people setting up business beside the crossing to catch the travellers on their way through, and it was a baking, brewing and cider making enterprise, and they had a monopoly, called all the travellers and the drovers taking their cattle through to the various markets. People made a lot of money here, because you had a kind of, it's a bit like a motorway service station, you sort of trapped audience. There was nowhere else.
They're still keen on making money in Lamberhurst, but these days it's more charity than commerce, and they have some unusual ways of going about it. Jill Haskell is busy preparing for the latest event, and her husband Lester's been roped in too.
I've been collecting the conkers for the local championship, which is held once a year at the pub.
Conkers are quite a big thing in the village because actually on the green they've got two very large conker trees, so it's quite symbolic to actually have a conker competition.
It's part of the fabric of the community, I suppose. It's something we've done at school as kids, and it's just carried on from that, really. It's just part of the English way of life, I suppose. It's a bit eccentric, but it's good fun. And that's at the end of the day, that's what it's about, having a laugh, maybe a pint and some fun.
Actually on our posters we actually class it as big kids. I don't think the adults ever really grow out of having a bit of competition with a couple of conkers. I just think it's sort of their way. They are now allowed to actually be those big kids actually while they're playing with the conkers.
On the edge of the village, Colin Caulfield is putting another seasonal harvest to good use.
The reason I went for apple growing was because I could only afford a very small farm, and so it had to be something quite intensive. And apples, I worked in New Zealand, and I'd also worked for this other farmer in Kent, so I'd sort of learnt the ropes growing apples, and I'd done a degree in botany, so that helped. So I wanted to do something with plants. That's really where it all started. We just couldn't make a living selling our apples to the supermarket and decided to turn everything into juice. I thought we couldn't make any money juicing it, and so I grubbed all the old orchards and just kept that one orchard, and we found we can actually make money growing the apples as well as juicing them. We're making profit from the apples and from the juice, so we're busy planting up again. So I think there is scope for growers to actually grow apples purely for juice. We're going to turn these all into juice. Some is private customers who've got them in their gardens and they bring them into us and we bottle it for them, and these other ones are coming to us which we're going to process into our own juice. Cox is still my favourite, and that's what we're replanting, because I think the trouble is people's tastes are changing and they're going for a sweeter, crisper apple these days, like Braeburn and Jazz and Cameo. But I'm a bit worried that perhaps in 10 years' time we won't get enough Coxes, so we're carrying on with Coxes, good old traditional English apple. We drink it every day, partly as a sort of quality control, and yeah, we enjoy it. Yeah, the kids sometimes say, oh no, not more apple juice, so we tend to bring all the reject bottles into the house. I must admit, I eat a lot more apples now than I ever used to when I was a kid. I think most kids are allergic to fruit and veg, aren't they?
They seem to like their food fresh and natural in Lamberhurst. Brian Harris has been catching his own supper for as long as he can remember.
I started fishing, I'm told, when I was about 4 years old. The father and the family always fished. But I didn't fly fish till I was about, I don't know, 13 or 14 years old. And I was given a box of old flies, tried one out and caught a trout on it, and after that I was hooked. Well, I'm dressing a fly, or tying a fly, as some people call it. It's a fly for early parts of the season, March, April, and again at the back end of the season. October, even September. It's a fly that rainbow trout seem to like in particular, and I always try to tie flies that are apposite for the time of year, which is why I selected this particular pattern, which is called a black glister tadpole. I think it started back in Macedonian times. The Greeks apparently started dressing flies or tying flies. They had trout in the rivers, and there was a guy who actually tied a fly which is very similar to a fly that we now have, which is called a soldier palmer. And ever since then, people have found out how to catch trout and other fish on flies. Basically, you start with a hook, and then you have tying thread, or what it used to be called silk. It's now nylon. And you wind the silk around the hook. You attach various materials. They've all got their different characteristics, colours. And you just sort of either tie a lure, which is a rather colourful, garish looking thing, or you can tie an insect imitation, which if you held it in your hand beside a natural insect, sometimes very difficult to tell which is which. I do like to eat trout occasionally, particularly smoked ones, but you can't eat hundreds of trout, and you know, you tend to catch perhaps between 400 and 500, 600 fish a year. So you can't eat all those, and you can't put them all in the freezer. So I sell mine to the brown trout. Lots of anglers do, and the brown trout pub, of course, specialises in rainbow trout. Various guises. People seem to love it, so there, why not?
The brown trout is more than just a place to eat. Every Wednesday night, it's where the men of the village can go to share Brian's secrets.
Because we're going to fish this one deep, gold tips rather than silver has more effect at depth.
If you make everything yourself, there's a lot more satisfaction than if you just go and buy a fly from a shop and use it. And I used to catch fish in Australia by using a bar of soap in a net to catch shrimps, or gum leaves to catch shrimps, and then using the shrimps to catch the fish. And I think it's the whole thing about doing everything yourself right the way through. It's a lot more satisfying, especially for me anyway.
But there she be. Call it what you like, orange glister tadpole. Right, go to it.
Go to it.
Right. If anybody needs bits,
I can't put a button on.
It's just the old hunter-gatherer thing. It's sort of very satisfying to catch something you can eat with something that you've made yourself.
When you actually tie your own fly and you catch a fish on it, the adrenaline rush, I find, is immense, rather than a shot-bought fly.
A few hundred yards away, in another village pub, the Checkers, preparations for the annual conker competition are stepping up a gear.
Some of them are not too bad. We've got fairly round ones, but we have got some little ones somewhere. But we let the competitors choose their own conker. So I'm sure they'll inspect what they're actually going. I mean, some might go for a little chip on the side, and some might go for the smaller ones because they're harder to hit. So it's lots of different techniques that the competitors use.
The rules are very complex. I don't understand them at all. I just string and take part.
Reigning champion James Weston is weighing up his chances of another success.
Well, I want to win it again, yeah. Pretty confident that I will. I've got quite a hard swing that smashes the conkers. No one can beat me in the village, really.